Hello, my beautiful friends. I am Laurel Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and fall asleep, all while deepening in your connection with your beautiful team of angels who love you so. If we're meeting for the first time, I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And I have the most wonderful job. I offer one-on-one angel sessions, soul mentoring, and a variety of classes designed to inspire your spirit. And I offer new classes about every 6 weeks or so. So if you are looking for a sweet, intimate, inspiring class, I invite you to come to my website at illuminating-souls.com, where you can see what I've got going on. And you can also sign up for my mailing list. There are 2 different places you can sign up for my list. At the top of the page, you can sign up for my general mailing list, and you'll receive all of my announcements. And then further down, you can sign up for the daily inspiration email blast, and you will receive an inspiring email from me every weekday. I also post regularly on Facebook. And then there is this beautiful podcast. We have over 240 episodes at this point, so lots of content for you in the archive. And if you are a regular listener, it would be wonderful if you would consider leaving a rating or a review on your favorite podcast app. And also, I love to hear from you. How is the podcast working for you? So, I'm so glad that you're here, and welcome. And I invite you to get cozy and snuggle on up. And I did design this as a sleep podcast because I listen to sleep podcasts every night to help build the bridge between my waking life and then that deep mystery of sleep. And I've been listening to sleep podcasts for many years now, and I love the genre so much that in 2021 I was guided to add my voice to the voices that are lulling people to sleep. What I didn't anticipate was that so many of you would enjoy listening in your waking hours. So however you are guided to participate with this podcast, you have my blessing. Whether you're going about your day or whether you're curling up at the end of your day, ready to drift off to sleep, I welcome you here. For those of you that are regular listeners, you may notice that I have posted a couple of replays, and I don't really have a good reason for that other than I have just been in the quiet places. I've had the intention of recording new material for you, but every time I pull up to my desk and it's early morning and I look at the microphone, I think, oh, not today. Because there is a creative spirit that goes into each of these episodes, and I think I've been needing a little more time in the stillness and in the quiet. So if you happen to see a few more replays popping up over the coming weeks, just know everything is fine. And I think I'm just in incubation. One of my teachers says there's a difference between incubation and inertia. And I really feel like I am in incubation right now. As I record this, we're in spring, the spring season, and I relate so deeply to the energies of spring. Every year my husband plants a garden. He loves to grow tomatoes for me and for all the neighbors and family that love them. And so there is this genesis that happens in our yard where the planter boxes are bare dirt with perhaps, the occasional weed or volunteer. We have some volunteer tomatoes right now and volunteer carrots and some cilantro. But otherwise, it's pretty bare back there. That rhymed. So we're now in the part of the season where he is sprouting his seeds and planting some of the plants that have already had a start to life. And within the next few months, our backyard is going to become a cacophony of tomato plants, taller than I am, with more tomatoes than we can eat by ourselves, which is the joy of growing tomatoes because we get to share them with people. We share them with our family and we share them with our neighbors, and it's wonderful. And so I love the season of spring because it reminds us that we come from these times of perceived dormancy and stillness and incubation, but all the while it is our nature and our essence at some point to blossom open, whether that happens in alignment with spring or whether it happens in February. The thing about being a human being is our blossoming can happen at any time. We are not controlled by the seasons as nature is. But it's still such a beautiful reminder that there are parts of us preparing to blossom open. There's parts of us that we are clearing out, that we are completing. I'll take the gardening metaphor one step further, not to annoy anybody, but it's like we're also weeding our gardens. You know, like what's the old that we don't want? What's the pile of papers sitting on the corner of our desk or our table that we haven't gone through in months that perhaps it is time to go through? There is this call to life sometimes. And it doesn't mean that we have to come into this place of intense activity. I think it's one of the things I love so much about the concept of blossoming open and incubation and germination and all of those themes that have an organic sense of aliveness, is that it doesn't require our conscious participation. It just is. That there's a life force, an essence, a greater aspect of self that is always in motion, even if our physical bodies are still. So I just bring to you the wisdom of blossoming open, the wisdom of springtime. And I speak this from the place of being in the stillness. Being in that place of not having the energy to do a lot. I have ideas, I have inspiration, I'm not lacking in inspiration. But right now, the gap between my inspired self and my self that gets things done, there's a little bit of a gap there. I don't want to say there's a big gap because who am I to perceive the nature of the gap? It always feels big. But sometimes I'm just a few hours away from the aspect of me that can create movement. It's like, have you ever looked at your garden, whether it's a rose bush or peonies or hydrangeas or your tomatoes even, and the buds are tight, and then it's like you blink, you go get a glass of water or make a sandwich or something, and all of a sudden they're in full bloom. That's how we work too. So if you are in a place of stillness or fatigue, or life is just asking an awful lot of you and you need a break, it's okay. You have permission to rest. You have permission not to know your answers. You have permission to simply be in this moment. And in this moment, the angels are with you. And I am here to keep you company as well. So if you are preparing for bed, I invite you to get cozy and snuggle on in. We're in sort of the last part of the cold nights here in our area. So I know I'm just a couple weeks away from taking the extra blankets off the bed. I love sleeping with lots of blankets, the weightiness of it. And so I know I'm going to have to put those blankets away pretty soon because we're going to come into warmer weather. And so I'm really enjoying sleeping right now when it's cool, when I go to sleep, because I know that that's not going to be the case fairly soon. And so I love getting to curl up and go to bed. And so I share my love of that with you, with all the pillows and the covers and the soft sheets. So I send you blessings for a sweet bedtime. Even if it's your waking hours, whenever your sleep cycle will happen, I send you love for sweet bedtime and sweet dreams. Isn't that the loveliest saying? Sweet dreams. Sweet dreams, right? That would actually be a great name for a podcast. Sweet dreams. But I already have a podcast name. I always pick really long names for things. My classes always have these long rambling names. Like I'm fairly terrible at naming things. I'm being a little self-deprecating here. But of course I named something Sleepy Bedtime Blessings. That's a lot of letters. Versus Sweet Dreams. Very, very easy. You know, my classes are connecting with your angels and opening to your soul's joy or something. I don't really have a class name to that, but I tend to name things. I use a lot of vocabulary when I name things, which has nothing to do with going to sleep. I just went on a little bit of a tangent there. So let's get back to getting you ready for sleep. And I'm going to bring the angels in. They're already here, but I love sharing this ritual with you. So I'm going to take a deep breath in. I already started my breath, and go ahead and take a nice deep breath in, and we'll release as we gently call ourselves forward into the heart of God. And beautiful angels on high, we invite you to join us here, and we say yes to your invitation that we join you here in this beautiful sanctuary of light that you have prepared for us. Angels, I ask that you infuse this broadcast with waves of love and light and clarity and healing and inspiration in service to each of our beloveds listening to this message, no matter when or where they hear this message, that you will be with them in live time, that this ripple of goodness cascades to whenever and wherever this message is received. And angels, I ask that you create a soothing space so that each of us can replenish as we connect with the wellspring of love that is here for us right now. And my beautiful friends, if you have any prayers or intentions that you wish to share with the angels, I invite you to bring them into your heart now, as the angels receive your prayers and intentions and requests for assistance. You know, asking for assistance and asking for help is so much harder than we would imagine, because we're used to praying for other people. And sometimes the idea of asking for ourselves, especially if we have identified ourselves as being very capable, we think, who am I to ask for help? I'm taking them away from something more important. But as I shared with someone very dear to me earlier this week, if you were cold and it was warm and sunny outside, you would never think that you cannot partake of the sun's warmth. If it is so easy for us to say yes to the sun's warmth when it is available, why would God's love and assistance be any different? How could it be any less than the warmth of the sun? So if you need help with something, ask. It's not like a genie in a bottle where you're going to have guaranteed results. But I find that when I ask the angels and God for assistance, it creates a shift within me for sure and around me. And it doesn't mean that I get all of my wishes. It's not, again, not genie in a bottle. I haven't won the $1 billion lottery yet. I've asked. It hasn't happened. But on a day-to-day experience of life, it creates portals for grace to find me. It reminds me that I am not alone in my creation of my experience of life. That I am participating in a universe that has love present for me. It doesn't mean that the entire universe loves me. Clearly, not all people on the planet love me. I don't mean this as a narcissistic expression. But it means that I am functioning in a universe that has deep love for me. And if this is true of me, this is true for you. So I find asking for assistance brings me into alignment with that love. There are plenty of experiences in this world that are not of love. Yet, love exists. So just like if you have a cat or dog that has the gift of following that one, ray of light throughout your home, throughout the day, they purposefully seek out that light. They seek out the sunlight. So when we call ourselves forward into the heart of love, into the heart of God, when we ask for divine assistance, that is our way of following that stream of light. Let me focus over here where there is light. Let me focus over here where there is love, and there is assistance, and there is goodness. And that is what I find this way of being and engaging in life helps with. So my hope is it makes it easier for you to ask for assistance and then release the expectation of what that will look like. So take a deep breath in and feel the love of your angels as they bring forward a prayer of gratitude for you, because they are so deeply grateful for you and this opportunity of being of loving service for you and those you love. You are a miracle in this world. You are a blessing. This world is better because you are here, and we are so deeply, deeply grateful for you. So go ahead and cozy on up and snuggle on in if it's your bedtime. If not, you can time shift that till later. And we're going to move on into story time. And for story time, we are going to return to the community cookbook from Sauganash, which is a neighborhood in Chicago, Illinois. And this was published in 1939. It's a collection of tested recipes contributed by members and friends of the Sauganash community. And it's published under the auspices of the Sauganash Community Church Guild of Chicago, Illinois. So a while back, not too long ago, I did an episode where we read from this community cookbook, and we got through the bread section, which was amazing. We only got through the bread section. These recipes are fantastic. And again, if perhaps you haven't heard any of my community cookbook recipes episodes, I love community cookbooks. So what they are is they're collections of recipes put together almost always by groups of women, especially if you think about life before the internet. You know, now that we have our smartphones and our tablets and the computers, if you want a recipe, you look it up, or you're watching TikTok and somebody's making their grandmother's biscuit recipe, and we have so much access to recipes these days. But if you go back to life before the internet, you might watch Julia Child on PBS. You might have cookbooks in your library, your grandmother's recipes on index cards or pieces of stained paper. You know, when you have somebody's recipe and it's sort of stained because they've used it while they're baking or cooking. Those are such treasures. And back then, especially if we're talking 1939, there's no fast food. Almost all of the meals were made exclusively by the women of the home. That was their job. We were very gender specific back then. And so they were making 3 meals a day. And grocery stores, the way we know of massive grocery stores, didn't necessarily exist in the same way. You might have your local supermarket, your local grocery store, and your butcher and your baker, and maybe you had a refrigerator, or maybe you had an ice box, depending on the electricity of the moment. And it was also perceived that you had a certain amount of baking and cooking knowledge already. So when they would put together these community cookbooks, if it was a temple sisterhood, a PTA, a church guild, any of these groups where women would gather, they would share their recipes and then organize them together. And usually they're almost always spiral-bound books. And then they would sell them as a fundraiser. So I first stumbled across my first community cookbook, I think it would have been in 2022, and I fell in love. I found some community cookbooks from Chicago, and they were Jewish, so they were, the food of my people. And some of the names of the women were familiar to me, and I was in love. And I have a beautiful collection now that I share with you on the podcast. And this one is really cool. I must have gotten it off of eBay at some point. And it's from 1939, so really early on. So we're going to go through some more recipes here. And in the last episode that I used this particular community cookbook, we went through breads. We're now moving on to cakes. I love cake. I don't really eat it anymore, but I love cake. And cake, I'm sure, is one of the reasons I incarnated. God said, hey, can I send you back to Earth for another lifetime? And I was like, no, I'm good here. And God said, there's going to be cake. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm sure cake was one of my motivators for coming to planet Earth another incarnation. So this is perfect. We start off with golden angel cake, because of course we're going to start off with an angel cake on an angel inspired podcast. So we're going to take 1.5 cups of sugar, 3/4 of a cup of water, 6 eggs, 1 cup of flour, 3/4 teaspoon cream of tartar, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and 1 tablespoon of almond. Now, I don't know, I can't imagine it's almonds. It's probably almond extract. So boil the sugar and water until the syrup forms a long thread, 238 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, I'm going to keep reading, but I want to come back to that for a moment. Beat the egg whites very stiff. Add syrup to whites, slowly beating continually. When cool, fold in dry ingredients sifted together. Fold in well-beaten egg yolks and flavoring and bake in a tube pan in a slow oven for 45 minutes. And this was contributed by Mrs. W. Bischoff. So I want to go back to a syrup form, a long thread, and 238 degrees Fahrenheit. How many of you, when you were in grammar school, took home ec? Or if you're a guy, if you took shop? Because back in my day, we were separated by gender, and us girls took home ec and the boys took shop. They can't do that today, right? But I think about all the practical things I learned in home ec. It was a great class that I think everybody should have to take, not just girls. Like everybody, these are life lessons. So I remember learning about how to, make, candy into a softball, and not a softball like you play softball or baseball. I mean the soft ball stage. Or how to measure things, how to sew, really good life skills. And I probably really could have benefited from shop as well. So more life skills, please. And the other thing I want to mention is it says a slow oven for 45 minutes. That ovens back then weren't as precise as they are now, where a recipe tells you exactly what to set the temperature to. Back then it was slow, it was fast, it was hot, and you just knew because you were a homemaker and you knew these things. There are also many iterations of apple cakes here. This is going in alphabetical order, so we went from angel cake to apple cake. This one delights me because, again, we're assuming you know stuff. So you're going to fill a pie tin with sliced cooking apples. Just in case you don't know, cooking apples tend to be the tart apples like a Granny Smith or a Pippin. You blend 1 cup of flour, 1 cup of brown sugar, and half a pound of butter. And then you take small amounts and press it into about 1/8 of an inch thickness, spread over the top of the apples. Bake in a moderate oven. See, now we've got a moderate oven, about 45 minutes, and serve with whipped cream. So basically, you're taking the flour, the sugar, and the butter, and almost making a streusel, a crumble topping that you're going to then put over the apples. So it's sort of an apple crumble because it has no bottom crust. So I love a good crumble. I'm sure that would be delicious. And then there's a bunch of apple recipes: apple cake, apple delight cake. Oh, let's read that. It has one of my favorite words in it, delight, because I'll show up for anything that has delight in it. Like if you tell me we're going to go for lunch at a delightful place, I'm going to show up because it's delightful. It's one of my core words, delight. So apple delight cake. 1 cup of brown sugar, 1 cup of flour, 1 teaspoon baking powder, and 1/4 pound of butter. At some point there must be apples involved, I'm sure. So mix and put half of mixture in a square pan. Pat down, and here come the apples, and lay apple slices over this that have been sprinkled with sugar and cinnamon. I don't understand. Okay, oh, I see. So you're going to pat that down and lay apple slices over this, but the apple slices have been sprinkled with sugar and cinnamon. And then put the rest of the mixture over the top. Bake half an hour, and when cold, cut into squares and serve with whipped cream. Serves 6. And this is from Mrs. C. Coble. My mom used to have like a shaker in the pantry that had sugar and cinnamon mixed together. So anything, we called it brown sugar and cinnamon, but it wasn't really brown sugar. It's just what we called it. It was white sugar mixed with cinnamon. So sugar and cinnamon mixed together, sprinkled on anything, makes it more delicious for sure. Okay, here's one more, I think, and then we'll skip on to a different kind of cake. I don't want you to get oversaturated with apple cake options. So this is an applesauce cake. Because again, back then, cooking with a can of this, a jar of that, taking prepared foods and bringing them into your daily cooking made things easier. So this is my kind of recipe. 1 box of graham crackers rolled, right? So we're going to smash up the graham crackers. You know where we're going with this, right? We're going to make a graham cracker crust. Mix with 1/4 pound of butter melted. And then mix 1 can of condensed milk with 1 can of applesauce and the yolks of 3 eggs beaten, juice and rind of 1 lemon. Add beaten whites of eggs last. Oh, I guess that's how we're supposed to put it together. So, I see. Okay, hang on. Sorry, I need to read ahead here. Line the tube pan with the cracker mixture, because that's our crust, right? Fill with applesauce mixture and sprinkle cracker mixture on top. Bake 40 minutes in the slow oven and serve with whipped cream. Everything's getting whipped cream here because everything is better with whipped cream. And this is from Mrs. P.J. Mullen. So it sounds like we make the cracker mixture. We got that part. Then we've got the can of condensed milk with the applesauce. And then the 3 eggs beaten with the lemon juice. So that all gets mixed up. And then you beat the egg whites and then you fold that in. So it's going to make a fluffy cake. Look at me. I can cook. Good thing I had home ec. But I'm not going to make this. And there are ads in this book. One is for the Lander shop. Again, phone numbers, the old style where they start with an alpha code, an alphabetical code. So this is Kildare 9403. So KIL. You would go to your rotary phone and you would look to see what numbers represent the letters KIL. So it's a very easy way to share phone numbers because there were 3 digits you didn't have to remember. Right? So KIL. So Kildare, which is a street near where we used to live. They are open they're open Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday evenings, and they specialize in lingerie, hosiery, handkerchiefs, handbags, greeting cards, and gifts. And they're at 4333 Peterson Avenue. This is going to be a weird Skokie-centric memory, which has nothing to do with community cookbooks, but when I saw lingerie and hosiery, there was a lingerie store in downtown Skokie called Schwartz's. And everyone, I mean everyone, would be taken at some point in puberty to Schwartz's and get measured for your first bra. It was a rite of passage. I was, of course, horrified and humiliated and hated it, which started my lifelong animosity towards confining undergarments, I guess I will say. But just because I know a few of you listen who spend time in Skokie, and perhaps you also have memories of Schwartz's. But if we lived, I guess, in Sauganash, we would have gone to the Lander shop. There's also an ad here for John Allen. He is a photographer he's on Western. I don't know why this makes me so happy. I just think, oh, home. And okay, there's more apple recipes, which I'm going to skip over. There's a banana cake recipe. But let's go to something a little different. Here's one I've never heard of before, a bishop cake. Have you ever heard of a bishop cake before? It seems like it's going to be really dense because let me read to you what's in it. It has 9 eggs. So if we're starting off with 9 eggs, you know that there is flavor in this cake. 2 1/4 cups of sugar, 3/4 of a cup of water, 1 1/2 cups of cake flour. So very little flour considering how many eggs and how much sugar's in here. 3/4 of a teaspoon of cream of tartar, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and 1 1/2 teaspoons of vanilla. So beat the whites of the eggs. Wow. So you're going to beat the 9 egg whites until thick. Boil sugar and water to the thread stage, which I have already shared with you my prowess of knowing what that is because of home ec, even though I haven't done that in, I'm sure, 45 years. And add to the whites of eggs. Then beat yellow of egg and add to mixture. Fold in dry ingredients and bake at 325 degrees Fahrenheit oven for 1 hour. Bake in a form cake pan and put upside down when taken out of oven until cool. I wonder if that's one of the spring form pans like you would use for cheesecake. And this is Mrs. W. Seinfeld. I can't imagine what that's like, that cake. Must be fluffy for sure. Sweet, because it has a lot of sugar in it. I don't know. I'm not going to make it though. If you make it, let me know. Send me an email. Okay, this one sounds good. Okay, it's a chocolate graham cake. So we're going to have 1/4 cup of butter, 1 cup of sugar, 3 eggs, 1/2 cup of flour, 1 1/2 cups of graham crackers rolled finely. Anything that has graham crackers in it, I'm a fan. 1 1/2 teaspoons of baking powder, and 3/4 of a cup of chocolate milk. How can this be bad? It involves chocolate milk, butter, graham crackers, and sugar. Like it's a festival of flavor. So we're going to cream the butter and sugar, add the eggs one at a time and beat thoroughly. Add sifted dry ingredients alternately with the chocolate milk. I mean, come on, a recipe with chocolate milk, that's joy. Bake in 2 layers for 25 minutes in a moderate oven. Of course, serve with whipped cream. Whipped cream with everything, please. And then there are a lot of chocolate cake options, which I'm not going to read all of them to you because, listen, we have plenty of chocolate cake recipes, right? But we do have one called a gorgeous chocolate cake. I love that. Like, I'm so confident in my cake. Gorgeous is going to be in the title. There's a chocolate potato cake where you're using some mashed potatoes for some bulk. That's interesting. A chocolate orange bittersweet cake. Now, I am a fan of chocolate and orange together, so that sounds interesting. I love this one. This is called Very Good Cupcakes. So, it's called Very Good Cupcakes versus Gorgeous Chocolate Cake. So, they're just very good versus awesome, awesome cupcakes. They're just very good. So we're just going to really kind of set the bar right there at very good. I don't know why that just really amused me, but maybe because it's early in the morning. So here's how you make very good cupcakes. You're going to take 2 eggs, beaten until light and creamy. Add 1 cup of sugar gradually and beat well. Add 1 cup of flour in which 1 teaspoon of baking powder has been sifted. Add 1/2 cup of hot milk with a small piece of butter dissolved in the milk. You're going to bake that in muffin tins, and it makes 16 small cakes, and cover with orange icing. Now, the orange icing recipe might be somewhere here in this cookbook, but it's not right here. And this is from Mrs. Richard Koepp. I don't know how to pronounce that. There's then Philadelphia red cake, which I wonder, is this an early form of the red velvet cake? It must be, because it has sour milk, has 2 tablespoons of cocoa. So this sounds like this is red velvet cake. It doesn't say about the red food coloring though, but that must be a part of it. There are 2 recipes for Danish layer cake. I don't know what makes a cake Danish. There's a dark eggless cake. A couple of different recipes for date cakes. This one date cake has, wow, it sounds really rich. I think this is the kind of cake my dad would have loved, because he liked things like fruit cake. Like, he liked dense cakes with a lot of things in them. Well, okay, just so you know, I am my father's daughter. He loved any kind of cake. Let's just be really clear. Cake, pie, Danish. He was a dessert guy. So, of course he was. I am his daughter. Anyways, this sounds like something my dad would have liked. 1 cup of sugar, 1/4 cup of butter, 2 eggs, 1 cup of sour cream or milk. I think you have to go sour cream here, because that is going to give it so much more flavor than just milk. 1/2 teaspoon of soda, 2 cups of flour, 1 teaspoon baking powder, 1 teaspoon cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of cloves, 1 cup of raisins, 1 cup of dates, 1 cup of nut meats. I think you have to go walnuts here, walnuts or pecans, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So do you see what I mean about a really dense kind of fruit cake, but not a fruit cake? So you're going to sift the flour, measure, add baking powder, salt, and spices, sift together 3 times. Again, home ec class, a sifter. You would have an actual sifter where you would squeeze the handle and it would sift things for us. And then you add the nuts, cream butter, add sugar gradually, then add 1 egg at a time, beating thoroughly. Dissolve the soda in sour cream and add alternately with flour, etc., and raisins and dates. Bake in a tube pan in slow oven of 325 degrees Fahrenheit for 1 hour. And this is from Mrs. George Ward. So we're only up to the D's here. We're only up to the D's. We've got a lot more alphabet to go through here with just the cake part of this community cookbook. What a treasure trove this is. We're now moving into the devil's food cake part of the cookbook. Here's a super simple one. 1/2 cup of butter, 1 1/2 cups of sugar, 3 tablespoons of water, and 1 1¼ squares of bitter chocolate. How is this cake if there's no flour? Oh, because the flour comes later. Got it. Because I'm looking at the ingredient list, I'm like, there's got to be flour involved here. And there is. It's just not in the ingredients list. But again, they're assuming 1939. Girlfriend, you know how to cook. So we're going to heat the above in a double boiler. Again, home ec. Thank you. I know what a double boiler is. Until sugar is dissolved. I say this because how do kids these days know what a double boiler is if someone doesn't teach them? Probably from watching TikTok, right? So you're going to beat that thoroughly. You're going to cool the mixture and add 2 well-beaten eggs, 1 cup of sour milk with a teaspoon of baking soda in the sour milk, and then you're going to add 2 cups of cake flour and bake in a flat pan or in layers. Bake in moderate oven. And the frosting is 1 cup of powdered sugar. Everything with powdered sugar is better. 1 teaspoon of butter. 2 teaspoons of hot coffee. And 3 teaspoons of cocoa. I bet that's delicious. I just want the frosting, please. Please, just the frosting. Okay, we have another graham cracker cake, which I'm sure is delicious, but I'm going to keep going because I really want to give us other options. This one's interesting. gumdrop fruit cake, which has actual candy gumdrops in it. Like, come on, mixing candy and cake? Amazing. Although I'm not a gumdrop fan, so, but still, if it's cake, I'll show up. So we have 2 cups of shortening, butter is preferred, 1 cup of white sugar, 1 cup of brown sugar, 4 eggs unbeaten, 2 cups of unsweetened applesauce, 2 teaspoons of soda, 4 cups of sifted flour, 1 cup of dates, 1 cup of Brazil nuts, FYI, high in selenium, really good for you. I don't know why I needed to tell you that, but that's what I always think of when I think of Brazil nuts. I've heard from different nutritionists to have 1 or 2 a day, and then you'll have enough selenium. Look at all the helpful information I am able to share with you. Now come the gumdrops. 1 cup of small gumdrops. And tell me you are not eating the gumdrops that are left over. It's like putting M&Ms in cookies. You are absolutely eating the M&Ms. 1 cup of seeded raisins and 2 teaspoons each of cinnamon, nutmeg, and allspice. All right, and then we just put it all together. There's more instructions, but let's be real. None of us are making gumdrop cake, so I don't need. If you're going to make it and you need the instructions, email me. I'll send them to you. Okay. Best gingerbread. Okay, we're not going to read that one, though. There's gold cake, which I think I would call white cake. That's what we called it. There's chocolate cake and white cake. We never called it vanilla cake, but they're calling it gold cake. Okay, we're getting into a lot of variety of cakes now that I've never heard of before. There's something called a Lady Baltimore cake. Don't know what that is. Let's look at it. So we're going to have 3.5 cups of flour, half a teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1 cup of shortening, 2 cups of sugar, 1 cup of milk, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and 6 stiffly beaten egg whites. So you're going to sift the flour 3 times with salt and baking powder, cream shortening and sugar thoroughly. Add sifted dry ingredients alternately with milk and vanilla, beating well after each addition. Fold in egg whites and bake in 3 greased 9-inch layers to moderate oven, 350 degrees for 30 minutes. And this is Mrs. W. Olson. I'm assuming there's some sort of whipped cream or frosting, because if you've got 3 layers, somehow we're putting this thing together. But that is what a Lady Baltimore cake is. There's also a lemon pudding cake, which sounds good. A lightning cake, which is 1.5 cups of sifted cake flour, 1 cup of sugar, 2 teaspoons of baking powder. It also involves milk, so it must be because it cooks quickly or something like that. There's a Mexican wedding cake. Ooh, I love Mexican wedding cookies. I wonder if this is anything like that. Let's see. We take 1/2 cup of butter, 2 tablespoons of powdered sugar, 1 cup of flour, 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and 1/2 cup of nuts chopped. I think Mexican wedding cookies typically have pecans in them. Soften butter, cream with sugar, sift flour and baking powder, add to first, add nuts and vanilla, shape into cakes 1/2 inch by 2 inch. Bake slowly and then roll in powdered sugar when cold. Mrs. L.T. Crab. I wonder if they sound like they're Mexican wedding cookies that are perhaps cake-ish. Then there's a lot of Norwegian recipes. Norwegian poor man's cake, Norwegian Christmas cake, and Norwegian Yule cake. Well, let's go with the poor man's cake. We've got 2 eggs, 2 tablespoons of cream, 2 teaspoons of melted butter, 2 tablespoons of sugar, 2 teaspoons of lemon, and flour enough to roll. So we combine the ingredients in order given and roll very thin. Cut in diamonds, make a slash across one end and pull the other end through the roll and fry in deep fat. Ooh, it's fried, that's good, until golden brown. Drain on brown paper and sprinkle with powdered sugar. Again, that sounds like a cookie, doesn't it? And then there's a full-page ad here that says, when in need of vanilla extract, remember the Sauganash Community Church Guild can supply your demand. Call any guild member for further information. So they must have been selling vanilla extract as a fundraiser, I guess. That's interesting. Now we come to orange cakes. Orange cake. There's like 4 different orange cakes and orange butter frosting. Oh, that just sounds delicious. Orange sponge cake. I have not had breakfast yet. All of these are sounding so good to me. So, yum. Let's see what comes after orange cakes. Okay, we have made it to pound cakes. Again, if you're of my generation, and especially if you grew up around Skokie, how many of you remember the Sara Lee pound cake? Everyone always had Sara Lee pound cake in the freezer. And you would uncrimp the aluminum tray and take the paper cover off, which always some pound cake crumbs would be remaining, and those would be fun to scrape off and eat. And then you would slice the pound cake. And I say Skokie specifically because we had a Sara Lee outlet store there. So we always had Sara Lee pound cake in our freezer for special occasions. So I don't know that we ever made our own pound cake, but Sara Lee was the deal. So we have 1 cup of butter. Well, okay, so my family's pound cake recipe is buy a Sara Lee pound cake. Take it out of the aluminum tray. Voila. You have pound cake. Add whipped cream. No, we didn't really add whipped cream. I'm just being... Everything else comes with whipped cream in this cookbook. So add whipped cream. Okay, so here's a pound cake recipe. 1 cup of butter. 1 1/3 cups of sugar. And we're going to cream that together. 5 eggs. Add 1 at a time. 2 cups of flour. Mix a little bit at a time. And bake in a slow oven for 1 hour. I mean, pound cake. It's like pound cake and shortbread. They're just delicious. You can't mess them up, right? Delicious. Wow, there's a couple of prune cakes. I don't know that any kid of my generation ever asked for a prune cake, but I'm sure back in the day when we had to make do with what we could have in our pantry or from the supermarket, prunes were probably a really great way to sweeten things. So, a 7-day prune cake. Is it because it takes 7 days to make it? I don't know. Let's see. So we're going to take 1.5 cups of uncooked prunes, 1.5 cups of granulated sugar, 3/4 cup of shortening, 3 eggs beaten, 2 3/4 cups of flour, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of mace, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1.5 teaspoons of soda, and 3 1/4 cups of boiling water. So wash the prunes and boil in sufficient water to cover 10 minutes, then drain, pit, and put through a food chopper using a medium knife. Cream the sugar and shortening. Add beaten eggs and mix. Add prunes and mix. Add flour sifted with salt, spices, and 1/2 teaspoon of soda, and mix well. Add coffee in which remaining teaspoon of soda has been dissolved. Beat well and pour into 3 well-greased layer cake tins. Bake in moderate oven of 375 degrees for 25 minutes and put the layers together with butter and sugar icing. I wonder if it's because it lasts 7 days or something like that. And this is from Mrs. C.E. Lund. All right, then we have a raisin nut cake, something called Shirley Ann cake. Let's see, it involves, cake stuff, like you would imagine, shortening and cream and sugar, grated chocolate, egg whites. And then we get into spice cakes and sponge cakes. And then we've got the tomato soup cake, which I've never had. But there's 2 different tomato soup cake recipes. So we're going to take 1 can of tomato soup. I'm sure Campbell's. Didn't everybody have Campbell's back then? 1 cup of sugar, half a cup of melted butter, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of soda, 2 cups of pastry flour, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of ground cloves, 1 teaspoon of nutmeg. Don't overdo the nutmeg. 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 cup of chopped nuts, and 1 cup of chopped dates. And you mix that all together. And you bake in a moderate oven of 375 degrees for 45 to 50 minutes. I bet that would have an interesting flavor. All right, we have 1 more page, and we have made it through the cake section. There's something called a wind-blown cake, a Dixie white cake. It has coconut baked in the mixture. And then a white cake and a yellow cake. Oh, I think that's what we would call, we called it a yellow cake, not a white cake. That sounds more in alignment with what I remember. And then there is an ad for Quality Dairy Stores. They were at 3314 Devon. And their phone number is Tessville, T-E-S, Tessville 2145. And they have homemade ice cream and all fountain services. Ooh, I bet that would have been a good place to go to before my day. And that brings us to the end of the cake section. And so, next time, when we have an episode where we tune back into the Sauganash Community Cookbook, we will go to yet another section. I don't know which one yet. But I will tell you the next section in the book is confections. I don't know that I can do a whole episode about confections. That might be a little too hard for me. We'll see. We'll see how I feel. Oh, okay. Well, here's one. I'm gonna give you one confection recipe because it just caught my eye. Chocolate cornflakes candy. Sign me up. 1/4 pound of sweet chocolate, 1/2 ounce of bitter chocolate, and 2.5 cups of cornflakes. So you're basically making chocolate bark with cornflakes in it and a dash of salt. So you melt the chocolate in a double boiler, drop onto wax paper, cool. Delicious. What's not to love? Right? Like we knew about Rice Krispie bars that had Rice Krispies in it. This is cornflakes and chocolate. Delicious. Okay, well maybe we'll go to confections next time. I'm not sure. I'll have to see where I am. So for now, though, gorgeous, beautiful friend, thank you for joining me on this trip down memory lane as we explored the cakes that were made by the lovely women of the Sauganash Church Guild. I think that's what they were called. So a huge wave of gratitude to all of the women who kept us fed for generations and learned how to make creative things out of what they had in their pantry. And for you, beautiful you, I'm so grateful for you. So I wish you the sweetest of dreams. I wish you delightful, sweet dreams of gumdrop cake and other forms of deliciousness. and I send you blessings of love. Thank you so much for joining me here, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon. Thank you.